Let's see how many people leave the meeting.
Can I unmute?
So if
I've
you
just
could
gone on. Where's the chick? It's
Hang on.
gone.
Hello. Yeah, I'm just going to mute
Hi,
you. Just going to mute you, Di.
Okay, the chick's gone. I've just gone onto the site. It's not
Oh,
on the
okay.
box.
Well, I think I said it would probably go for a wander this week.
Oh, right.
We might have a look at it in a minute. Right, I'm going to just, I'll just mute everybody again.
Anyone else waiting?
Yes, two.
Okay.
Just get them in.
Yeah, while they're coming in, then that's good.
Okay, Simon, over to you.
Once I unmute myself again. So yeah, Keith, thank you very much for coming along and talking to Wild Winchester. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Yeah, always entertaining and informative as well, especially as the key role that you've had in the success of the Peregrines over the years in Winchester, especially at the cathedral. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this year's talk, especially the Q&A. Hopefully people have got some questions to ask you as well. So I'll hand across to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. Let me just work out which button to press for that. It's this. Here we go. And then slideshow. Come on. Slideshow. And from the beginning. There we go. Simon, can you see that okay? Brilliant.
Yeah, I'll unmute myself. I was only nodding at that point.
I saw you nod.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great to see everybody. There's 33 of us in the room, and thank you for coming along to hear this talk. So I'm just going to run through for about 15 minutes or so about what's happened over the years in Winchester. So it's only about Winchester, it's not about the rest of Hampshire. And just to say, to start off with, this very first slide is one of my favorites. It's actually Chester, who was our male peregrine in Winchester right up until 2022, where very sadly he died, having had an infection and an infestation of parasites. So what we're going to do is I'm going to run through some slides, talk about what we've done, what they've done, and then at a suitable time, I'll stop and we'll have a bit of a chat, and you'll be very welcome to come in and either type your question or simply unmute. So off we go. Right, come on, change slide. There we go, there's me. So I get all the exciting jobs. I get to wear a high-vis jacket and a hard hat quite often, and here I am up a crane. I'm actually 200 feet above the ground in this photo, on a crane in Southampton docks. And it's a crane that moves along a railway line. The funny thing about this crane is that it moves up and down the railway line somewhere within sort of half a kilometre or so of the beginning and the end. So this nest is actually the only mobile nest, the only mobile peregrine nest in the whole country, which is pretty special, I have to say. So facts and figures about peregrines. You've probably seen this before. I always put it on. It just helps to explain the differences. So the male and female are very, very different indeed in size. You know, you've seen with William, he's quite small compared to Winnie. Although I have to say, compared to Winnie, he's actually not bad. I've seen some peregrines where they're little, they're almost like chicks. They're so small, the males. The male is, you know, somewhere between 580 and 750 grams. Female will be somewhere between 925 and 1.3 kilos. So you never get a female that's smaller than the male. They lay their eggs between about the 21st of March up to the 20th of April. And beyond that, they don't lay them anymore after that. Usually 3 to 4 eggs, but you may remember Winnie laid 5 in 2020, surprised us all. And the incubation is about a month. They then fledge from the nest about 6 weeks after they've hatched. And very sadly, mortality is pretty high. In the first year, something like half the peregrines do die. And that's because they've got to learn how to hunt successfully, and they very often don't. They've got to learn how to fly successfully. They've got to do so many things and get them right, and they don't always do that. And they can breed when they're 2 years old. And the oldest one we know at the moment is 21 years old, but I bet there's some that are a bit older. Winnie, by the way, is at least 15 years old. I first knew her in about 2010, and she was already at least 2 years old at that point. So we don't know how old she is. This is just a chart showing you the growth of peregrine nests in Hampshire, right from the very first one in 1993, which was on the Fawley Power Station, which got knocked down a couple of years ago, right through to 2021 when it was at 20, and I haven't put 2022 on yet, and it was about 21 in that year. This year, I think, is going to be a bit lower. Just we can discuss it later, but there's a few nests that I thought would have peregrines in, and they haven't. There's a few nests in as well that are new, but mainly ones I'm seeing that I haven't got birds in. So there's something going on that's causing the numbers to be a bit lower this year. Well, I think everybody knows Winnie. Winnie is the peregrine, the female peregrine that's been in charge in Winchester ever since I started watching in 2010. And she is a fabulous looking bird. I mean, I think she's just gorgeous looking. She's got such a lovely dark head. And her mate for the first few years that I watched was Chester. And by the way, the thing about, just to go back, female peregrines always look fierce and male always look nice. So you would probably look at a male peregrine and think, you know, I could give that peregrine a little cuddle, but you wouldn't want to cuddle Winnie, guarantee it. But you might want to cuddle Chester because he's quite cute. Now, very sadly, Chester died in 2021. And like all male peregrines, he was a bit sort of shy and turned up at the nest with food, didn't hang around because he probably got told to go away and get more. So they very much serve the females, no doubt about it. And then briefly, some of you may remember in 2021, literally within days of poor Chester dying, we had Alfred turn up, and Alfred was only just about 2 years old. He'd been born in Andover. A lot of people said he should have been called Andy, but he was called Alfred. And yeah, he didn't stay around. In fact, I think he was probably sent packing because he really wasn't much good. He was so young, you know, he still thought he was a chick because he'd turn up to the nest, and instead of bringing food for Winnie's chicks, which is what the males should do, he actually came along and took away the food they'd got already and ate it. I think he thought he was just one of the brood, you know, and Winnie was going to mother him. Anyway, she didn't mother him, and he didn't stay for very long. But good news, 2022, we had William, and this is William with his very pale little cheek mark there. They've all got a pale cheek, but his is particularly big and very pale. And William is our male now, and there he is looking quite pleased with himself. He's just brought in a redwing there onto the nest tray to impress Winnie. So just put them side by side. When I talk about William's cheek patch, maybe you can just see there's Winnie on the left, and there's William, and he's just got this big white patch up the side of his head. It is very distinctive when you know it, but of course, if you don't look at it very often, it's not so familiar, but that hopefully shows the difference well. So back in 2010, they nested on the police HQ. In 2011, they failed. They did have chicks in 2010, they failed in 2011, and I think also in 2012. And we're pretty sure they nested in a gully on the roof. And nesting in a gully is no good. You're going to get rainwater coming through, and I'm afraid that was their downfall. So there they are, Winnie and Chester up the top on the old police HQ, safest building in Winchester for sure. Here we are on the roof. We're all harnessed up and tied to the roof because it's quite a windy and wet day, and we put the box up there for them with a roof. Talk about that later, I'm sure, because I know people are going to say, why don't we give them a roof now? And as you can see, not only are we harnessed up, so is the box, because it is pretty windy up there. And very quickly, we started having chicks, and Winnie's chicks came regularly every year with 2 or 3, absolutely superb. But in 2017, I'm afraid the police HQ was demolished, and now they've got housing in there. So they had to find somewhere else to nest. And we knew in 2017 that they were really keen to go on the cathedral. And we saw them sitting on the north transept by the rose window, which you can see with that big arrow. And if you go up there, that's what it looks like. It's quite mossy, and it is indeed a rainwater gully. So when it rains, that gets water in it, although obviously it has to rain a lot to really fill up. Now, we wanted to put a nest tray or something in, but unfortunately weren't able to straight away. But we did eventually do that in 2018, and here it is. This is as it was first looking when it was first put in. It was actually snowing the day we put it up. I remember that well. And so in 2018, great success. After a failure in 2017, we had 2 chicks on the tray. Fantastic. I mean, Winnie went straight to the tray. As soon as she saw it, she actually was nesting on it. She actually had eggs in it within a month of it being put down. So she liked it a lot. And we put the tray off the ground, as you probably saw, so that if the rain came, you know, they would just be sitting there like sitting on a pier, you know, the water goes underneath. 2019, we had 4 chicks. So there they are. Very pleased about that. 4 chicks is a very good brood size, but 5 chicks in 2020, and here they are all sitting around the nesting area. In the meantime, we'd realized that chicks will fall off the tray, as Di pointed out earlier, and they don't just fall off, they jump off as well. So we put a little ladder up there, so they've got a kind of training ladder so they can run up back onto the top. They can't do that when they're small. And indeed, if they do it and they can't get back up, Winnie will drag them back up by the scruff of the neck. We've seen her do that. But actually with just the 1 chick, this year, if it's off the tray, that's probably where it'll stay, and she'll probably feed it there. It won't need to go back up on the top again. 2021, we had 3 chicks. We had a lot of horrible weather, of course. And of the 3 chicks, very sadly, one of them died. It had an illness called, just forgotten the name of it at the moment, but don't worry, it's a fungal disease in the throat. And it had to go to the Hawk Conservancy, and very sadly, that bird had to be euthanized. But last year we had 2 chicks, and here they are being fed by Winnie, almost exactly the same date last year. They can see a little bit smaller than our chick this year, because of course they had to share the food. But they grew up pretty well. We had a male on the left and a female on the right. And I think they were called George, and they were named after Prince William's children. George. Yeah, anyway, they were called after the kid. Thank you, George and Charlotte, or Louis, maybe, I can't remember now. Anyway, male on the left, he actually took the first flight, so he's a lot lighter than the female. And so he took off, and I think she was a bit annoyed about that. So she had to go the next day and didn't make it, ended up in the neighbour's garden. So this was what the people living next door to the cathedral found, this big female peregrine looking a bit fierce. So we went and collected her, put her back in the gully, and off she went. And I think she did actually manage to fly well the second time. And of course, within days, they were flying around. They were very mobile. And indeed, here's the male chick chasing Winnie. And there's a lot of training going on. Here's Winnie with the male chick, I think, dropping food. Actually, that might be the female chick there, but she's actually got food, and the chick is chasing her in order to get the food. So 2023, introducing Rosie, our one and only chick. So we had 4 eggs, and very sadly, 3 of those didn't hatch. But we have got Rosie, who's been very much loved by Winnie and the rest of us here, and well fed. And I thought you'd just be interested to have a look at the dates. These are the different dates. So going back over the last few years, 16th of March, 17th of March, 10th of March. So 2021 was very, very early. That quarter's out. 15th of March, and then this year, very, very late. So there is quite a lot of variation. And that really will be driven by the weather. It's pretty cold actually at the beginning of March. So I think Winnie probably didn't want to get on with that at that time. And here is William actually at the nest site. Do you know what? I've just realized one thing rather embarrassing. I've just managed to lock my wife out of the house. So everything happens on live TV. Give me 2 seconds. That's okay. Sorted that. There's William sitting on the tray. He's a very good father, very, very good at taking over from Winnie when she's not there. Here's our chick, and just with those 3 eggs. Now, they didn't hatch, and I think there are 2 reasons why that could be. And I don't know which it is, but we've got to remember Winnie is now getting on in age, and she's got to the point now where she's most likely going to have just 1 chick a year. Secondly, it was very wet, and I did notice there was a bit of dampness around the tray. I think some of the drain holes in the tray have probably got blocked up over the last few years. So we're going to renew the tray this autumn. I've been talking with the cathedral about that. And there's a lovely shot of William looking down on the chick. This was just a moment in time, but it looks almost like, you know, he's transfixed, but he's not really. It just happened to be, he walked on the tray, had a quick look, and then sat on her. Here's Winnie. So look at the size difference. You know, you can see Winnie's very different. And here's Winnie feeding the chick. And there it is, looking rather fat. You can see here, this bit here, this is called the crop. And this is the part prior to the stomach. So they can take on board a lot of food and store it. Even though the stomach itself is full, they can take on extra food and then they can digest that later. And, you know, she's basically lying on the tray quite often asleep. There's only her, so she can go wherever she likes. I did actually think it looked rather as like as she'd been down to the pub and rather overindulged and came back and just crashed all over the place. But yeah, she's got the whole tray to herself. And that was the other day where we had Winnie and Rosie just snuggling up. Winnie's been spending a lot of time with Rosie. That's nice because normally peregrines have to run around finding food. I mean, back in 2020, Winnie was just out and back all the time with food for those 5 chicks. And, you know, it's just nice for her. She can just relax a bit. It's pretty taxing on a peregrine to actually go and do all that hunting and feeding, something that young peregrines do. But at her age, it was amazing that Winnie did that in 2020. So I've had photographs from friends who've contributed them. There's Winnie on the left. And of course, a big thank you already to the vergers who rescue our chicks every single year. They go up and down the stairs quite a lot when they jump out. Well, at least there's only 1 chick to rescue this time, so hopefully they won't have to do quite so many climbing of the stairs. Simon, I'm very happy to take any questions that people would like to come up with. Maybe you'd like to kick off with a couple to get us started. And if anybody else wants to type in the chat, then you can do that, or you can just simply unmute and put your hand up or something and ask. So, Simon, over to you.
I was just going to ask you a little bit more about the Hampshire population and what you think is going on at the moment. Obviously, there's things being talked about with, you know, avian flu and those kind of aspects. So, is it particularly down to the weather this time, or are there other factors going on?
Okay, so the Hampshire population is in total, as I said, about 20 pairs. There's usually about 20 nests, and there's usually then about another 5 pairs that don't actually nest but are hanging around. Maybe they're too young. This year I've managed to find, I think, 14 or 15 nests. That's a bit lower than I'd normally find. There are certainly some nests that aren't occupied this year. I've gone to the nest site, there's nobody there. And there are certainly places where there are pairs of peregrines and they haven't nested as well. So I think there's a couple of things going on. It's been a dreadful spring, wet, windy, cold. Everything is late. All birds are nesting later than they normally do, everything. And on top of that, we've got the problem of bird flu. Now, bird flu is passed from bird to bird, basically amongst colonial birds, things like seabirds that nest together, and it's actually in their droppings. And so when they live together, it's easily passed on to each other because they don't fly off to have a poop. They do it there and then. So ducks and geese, seabirds are the main transporters of bird flu. And those peregrines that nest along the coast eat a few waders and ducks and seabirds. And so therefore they are more likely than others inland to get it. Now, so we're quite away. Winchester's far enough away that I don't think Winnie and William go hunting down on the coast. But there are a few peregrines around Southampton and elsewhere around Portsmouth, and it may be that some of those do suffer. We've not been aware of any peregrines dying this year in Hampshire from bird flu, but I do know that elsewhere, you may have seen think it was Norwich, they lost their chicks, they died from bird flu, and there's certainly been some other cases as well.
Thanks. And I think you had a question in the chat.
Okay. Right, let me have a go. Here we are. Will William remain with Winnie as she gets older for future years, or will he look for a younger model? Well, I don't know. I'm going to guess that he will stay with Winnie, because Winnie's quite a dominant female with quite a special nesting site. So the females are very much the boss around the nest, as you've noticed, but they're also the boss when it comes to the territory. So it's her territory. So if she carries on producing eggs, even if they don't hatch, he'll stay with her. But I think what we'll probably find, I've been asked this quite a bit, 1 year, we'll just find Winnie doesn't come back. And that may be because she's died, or it may be because she simply has decided she'd rather be out there not nesting and, you know, go off and have a solo life, you know. In that case, if William stays at the cathedral, then he should pick up a female peregrine pretty quickly. There are a lot of unmated peregrines out there. The record, by the way, for a peregrine being replaced, having been killed, is 2 hours, which is pretty astonishing, which clearly shows that there are peregrines hanging around just in case there's an opportunity to nip in and take over. Well, look at Alfred. He was in within 2 days. So yeah, there are plenty of unmated peregrines around.
Has Alfred been spotted since he left Winchester?
No, he's not been spotted at all. So I don't know where he is. He might be around. That we quite often find that peregrines, you know, go off and we don't see them again, and then we suddenly see them 5-6 years later, you know, so maybe they go somewhere a long way off. Joanne Marsh, thank you for your question. Where do the chicks go when they're old enough to leave the nest? Well, we know about some of them. So one of them from Winchester is actually a male that's nesting in Aldermaston in Berkshire. We've got another male who I haven't seen recently, but he was from 2019, I think, and he went and turned up in, he was in Farnham actually, where I live, but he also turned up in Romsey. So they probably go 30 or 40 miles generally. I've seen quite a lot of these. We ring them, so we know quite a lot of them. We've probably seen about a quarter of the chicks at some point. One of them, very sadly, went to Heathrow Airport and flew into a jet engine. That was the end of that. Another one, very sadly, was shot. Was actually killed in Cambridgeshire. So, Guy, have all the peregrines in Hampshire had less chicks this year? Well, certainly some of them have. I definitely know that there are a number of nests with just one chick. So we've got New Milton, they've got one chick, but up in Andover, they've got 4. They normally have 2 or 3. Now they've got 4 this year. So swings and roundabouts, but I think there will be a few broods that maybe are a little bit smaller than in the past. Toby, thank you. Where is Rosie right now? Because she's not in the tray. That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. But what I will go and have a look for in a minute. Once we finish the chat, I'll go and get, I'll move the camera around. The great thing about the camera is you can move it. Although I sometimes crash the entire system when I do that. Wasn't my fault yesterday, I might add, but that does sometimes happen. Sune asks, is Winnie ringed? No, she was never ringed as a chick, so therefore we don't know who she is or where she's from. If she disappeared, would it be possible to know what happened to her? Well, it might be possible, because if she died, we might well find her body, but we generally don't, because of course, you know, birds can die anywhere in the countryside, so we don't necessarily know. John Morton, in Hampshire, do most peregrines nest on buildings, man-made structures, or are there plenty of natural sites? Good question. They mostly nest on man-made structures, so buildings like the cathedral, pylons. They like pylons. They're not very successful in pylons, because a pylon is actually the wettest and coldest and hottest place on any one day. You know, it's not a great place to be, very exposed. And when you do your first flight, you've got nowhere to run up and down. So when you fly, you've got to get it right. And if you get it wrong, you're then sitting on the ground beneath a pylon. And I then get a call and I can't get you up on the pylon again. So what we have to do is take the chick to the Hawk Conservancy. They then train it to fly. And then I get back within about 5 days and release it. And hopefully it flies back up to the top. And it normally does, which is really nice. Jacqueline, thank you for your question. Do you know any reason why the birds didn't stay at Romsey Abbey? Well, I don't know. I know they've been seen at Romsey Abbey this year, and there is a nesting tray there, especially for them if they want to use it. But I think it's quite a busy abbey. You know, I think there's quite a lot of bell ringing and other church activities, and it may well be, I think, where they were looking at nesting, if they were looking to nest, and we thought they were, was quite close to where the bell ringers go. So possibly that's something to be looking at for next year, perhaps. Certainly, how territorial are peregrines? Wondering how much space there is between nesting sites. Another great question. Generally speaking, about 1.5 miles when they're really packed in. So if you go along the coast, you know, there's a pair at New Milton, there's a pair at Keyhaven, quite often a pair a bit further along the coast, 2 pairs in Southampton, in fact, sometimes 3, you know, so 1.5 miles when they're really packed in tight. Otherwise, they could be about 5 miles apart in areas where they're not so tightly packed in.
Keith, just to add on that one,
yeah,
where's the nearest site to Winchester that they're successfully breeding at the moment?
I'm trying to think if I could get a map.
Sorry,
in my
I
head.
put you on the spot with that one.
Yeah, it's probably somewhere just north of, you know, sort of north of Eastleigh. So how far is Eastleigh? Eastleigh's about 5-6 miles.
Yeah,
that's probably it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to think there. Right, back to Joanne again. Do you ring the chicks born at the cathedral? Yes, we do. We ring the chicks. We ringed Rosie last week, and we put 2 rings on. We put a metal ring on, which is a BTO ring, which has its details, and then the other ring is a bigger one, a plastic one. They're very lightweight. They don't weigh much, and that one's got big letters on. So if you're watching through a telescope, you can then spot it and report it back to us. Madeline, hello Madeline, good to see you here. I know you've explained in a previous chat, but can you remind us why a roof isn't provided at the cathedral nest? Yeah, well, it's something which I wanted, is the fair answer. I did actually say, could we put a roof on this back in 2018? And I was told no, we couldn't. And I think the reasons were probably to do with it being a listed building, etc. And the roof would probably also be visible because it would kind of be higher than the wall. But I think there's probably a case to be put for having some sort of a roof, and I'm actually going to meet, you know, with the vergers to talk about this later in the autumn, because we're going to renew whatever we've got there. And all I will say is I'm going to put the case for putting some sort of a roof in, because yeah, it upsets everybody to see peregrines getting soaking wet, even though they were actually designed to be soaking wet. I mean, you know, 1,000 years ago, nobody was making a roof for peregrine when they were nesting. But I do see that it's a bit upsetting for people. So I think we should try and do something about it if we can. And if we can't, they're wild animals. They nest in the Arctic. You know, it snows on them. I've got photographs of peregrines sat in the nest, covered in snow. Incredible.
If you need protesters outside the cathedral when you go to see the vergers, let us know. I'm sure a few people would sign up for that. Placards and everything.
Okay. Thank you for that. That's good to know. They love them too. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The vergers are very, very fond of the peregrines. I mean, I think sometimes it probably drives them nuts on a busy day. I mean, they do, when they do their first flight and they crash land, there's always something big going on, like there's the mayor or something, you know, having a big function, and everyone has to sort of suddenly leave whatever they're doing to go and run around. And they've got this box. I love this. They've got this cardboard box, and it says on it, Peregrine Falcon Recovery Box, and they run out with this box, and the box contains a towel, probably a pair of gloves, protective gloves. And what they do is 2 vergers go out, and they go, one goes in front of the peregrine, so the peregrine's sitting on the ground kind of snarling a bit at whoever it is who's standing in front, and another one creeps up behind and throws the towel over the peregrine and scoops it up. And you probably heard me on the radio talking about this, but it was hilarious. About 2 years ago, we had a group of Polish tourists sitting on the grass just near the main entrance, you know, where the ice cream van is, near the refectory. And they were sitting there in a big circle having sandwiches and things. And this peregrine took its first flight, managed to soar all the way from the ledge and crash land in the middle of this group of Polish tourists. Now, the peregrine had never seen Polish tourists before. Polish tourists had never seen a peregrine before. And they all kind of, all the Polish tourists were sort of sitting there going, look at that, and the peregrines going, it's funny. Sorry, I just thought it was hilarious. Right, back to the point. Where is the nest site at Keyhaven? There are no tall buildings there. You're absolutely right. Well, Keyhaven is one of several places where in the past they have nested on the ground. And it's a bit of a dangerous thing to do. They nest on shingle. And there are 3 places in Hampshire where they do that. And there's also one in Sussex. But it's quite safe because you're not going to get things like foxes. But if you have a bad tide, high tide and a very, very big wind, you're going to have a problem. And 2021, all the ground nests failed. And I think they all failed last year as well, or at least most of them did, I think. So it's not a great plan. And I think the interesting thing is the birds that nest on the ground, at least some of them were born on the ground. So I think they do tend to learn, so birds that are nest on buildings and born on buildings, I think when they then go and nest, they go and nest on a building. Probably the same if they're born on a pylon, they go and nest on a pylon. I think it's a lot of learnt behavior. So we definitely know that. So it may be that if we don't have any new peregrine chicks born on the ground, that whole thing will just die out. Because the only other place they nest on the ground is in the Arctic. Right, Jacqueline, thank you. Where do the birds go in the winter? Well, I think Winnie stays around Winchester because she kind of owns that territory and she really doesn't want to lose that. So I think she's there most days. She might not be very obvious. She probably won't sit right by the tray, but she'll be around, I'm pretty sure. But some peregrines go away, particularly males, being a little bit smaller, go a bit further south. We get a big influx of peregrines, though, from Scandinavia. So lots of birds from Norway, Sweden, Finland come in the winter. They're bigger than our peregrines. They're a bit different to look at. And they come in and they then go back to Scandinavia to nest. Linda, hi Linda. When the chicks fledge, do they come back to visit the parents? Well, yeah, they do sometimes. It doesn't seem to happen at Winchester, but you may recall, Linda, we had one of the chicks from last year, or was it the year before, came back a couple of times to New Milton and popped up and was actually welcomed. It wasn't sent off. I've got another example, and in Andover where they nest on St Mary's Church, the female was actually on the nest, I think, or maybe the male was, can't remember now. One of them was on the nest and one of them was just on guard. And suddenly up pops a peregrine on the roof and we're all looking at it on the camera. And I said, well, that's a chick. It's a chick from last year. Whose chick's that? There was no aggression initially, and then eventually they sort of nudged it off. And I think that is an indication that was the chick from the previous summer coming back and therefore not sent away. And we've definitely seen examples of that elsewhere. So yeah, they do come back. Joanne, you're busy tonight with these questions. Goodness me. How does Winnie react to the vergers recovering her chicks? Well, I think she's a bit upset, but I mean, the thing I did notice when we ringed a chick last week, it was last week, wasn't it? Last Friday, she calmed down straight away. I mean, when we first did this in 2012, she went bonkers and didn't calm down for a good half hour afterwards. And now she just sort of, she gets a bit upset, obviously, makes a bit of noise. But for half the time, I didn't go up in the gully this year. I actually stayed down and watched it from below. But she went and sat on one of the little statues on the roof, and she just sort of sat around very quietly whilst it all went on. Quite surprised at that. Yeah, you'd almost think she'd got used to it. Definitely, she has got used to it, I think. More questions. What else can we talk about? The microphone. Yeah, well, there is actually a microphone up there, and for a couple of years it didn't work, but it's been fixed. And the problem, I think, is that the system that the cathedral use, Stream Days, I don't believe they can stream microphone sound. So if we want to have microphones, we'll have to have a different system, but I'm sure that's possible. It's up there, just needs a different company to send the signal through. Tabitha, the peregrines at Canada Common, is there a move to, just jumped up, is there a move to put an artificial tray on the pylon? Right, let me just explain what that's all about. That's in the New Forest. There's a pylon line goes through Canada Common, Plateford Common, just on the very top end. It's part of the National Trust land. And I was pretty annoyed about this. I got told by one of the people who watches those birds, sometimes it's a pair of ravens nesting on the pylon, sometimes it's a peregrine, and it's a stick nest. And I told National Grid that the peregrines are back and they were going to nest because they were hanging around the pylon, and they pushed the nest out of the pylon because they hadn't laid any eggs. They destroyed the nest to stop them from nesting because they had to do some work on the pylon. Well, they haven't done the work yet, and that's pretty annoying. I actually did discuss it with them, and I said, well, surely we can discuss this. We can, whatever it is, maybe you can just delay it a little bit, you know. And they said, no, can't do that, can't do that. And I'm afraid the nest got destroyed. They couldn't nest this year. So, but about putting up a nest box or something, there's absolutely no way National Grid will do that. They don't want peregrines in their pylons because they stop them from doing the work, which is why they got rid of the nest this year. I have to say, I'm pretty disappointed. If anybody's watching this from National Grid, I think you should be ashamed of yourself. What you did wasn't illegal, but it was totally immoral. And I will remind you of that every time I talk to you going forward. Di, have you got 2 pictures of the recovery of the chick on the 6th of June at the cathedral in 2021? Someone on Facebook said it had flown and rushed down, and I rushed down and spoke to 2 people that had reported it, so watched the recovery, did not post it. Maybe I should have. I don't know, Di. Don't know, but I do have photographs of a recovery, but probably not that one.
If you've got it, post it.
I've got some taken.
It's a simple one, though. If Di's got it, then seriously, people would love to see it.
Sorry, Di, are you saying you've got photos of it? You have. You're nodding. You're muted, but you're nodding. That's fine. Good. Oh, well, I think we'd like to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, put them on Wild Winchester, please.
Good. Right. Yeah, don't get me going on National Grid. I was actually in Bangladesh when all that was kicking off as well, which was even more annoying because I couldn't go and beat them up.
Again, you could have mobilised people from Wild Winchester or the Hampshire Birding Group.
The trouble is,
what they easily mobilised. Not so easy.
What they were doing wasn't illegal. If they'd been doing something illegal, they'd have got the police crawling all over them. In fact, the police have crawled all over them because somebody reported it. So I think they have. They've certainly had to have a think about it. My point really is simple as this: if they're going to do the work on the pylon in August or July, you could have just let the birds nest. That's absolutely, it would be fledging in next week. Crazy. Or the week after. Right, what do they typically eat? Well, that's an interesting one too, Joanne. And that we've done some analysis on this because the camera obviously records the whole time, and mainly they're eating feral pigeons in Winchester. But if you look at the camera in Andover, we've done the analysis on that, and they're mainly eating starlings. And if you look at the camera footage from Salisbury, they're mainly eating jackdaws. So I guess it's a case of whatever happens to be nearby, you get it because it's the easiest thing. And maybe there aren't many pigeons in Andover. I would have thought there were, but there are probably a lot of starlings because it's a bit closer to the countryside.
Do you get any comeback on the racing pigeons that we see in there from time to time?
No, I mean, I think there's no doubt about it. They do feed on racing pigeons, and I think the reason why they feed on racing pigeons is that racing pigeons tend to come over in groups. So if you're a peregrine, you're sitting there looking up in the sky, and you can probably see a group of racing pigeons coming towards you at about 2 miles away. So you set off, fly up, and you catch one. Whereas the sort of Winchester scrawny town pigeon doesn't really fly very high. So the chance of catching that is quite low, because it's operating really just in the sort of 50 feet above the ground. Do I get any flack? There is certainly flack from people who like pigeons, people who race pigeons and keep pigeons. And there are certainly people out there who've said it would be quite a nice thing to go and take a pigeon and put some poison on it and release it next to a peregrine nest. But the last time somebody did that, I reported them to the police, and the next day they ended up having a police car outside the house and got interviewed under caution. So people think twice about doing that now. I seem to recall there were a lot of starlings in 2020 or 2021. Maybe, I don't remember, I'm afraid. They eat wading birds quite a lot down on the coast, and the gulls as well. Southampton ones, a lot of gulls and a fair number of waders. Did you see the photo of a peregrine who had caught a puffin? I didn't, actually. That would have been a bit sad. No, but I did see some photographs the other day of a peregrine catching ringneck parakeets. It was quite a funny picture. I think I put it on the Facebook page. So you have this peregrine with this green parrot. It looked like a toy. But yeah, they do eat quite a lot of those in London because there are a lot of them. If we have a roof in Winchester, will we still be able to see them on the cameras? Well, that's a good question too, Debbie. One of the reasons for not putting a roof on right now is if we put a roof over the tray, for every email I got about why don't we have a roof, I'd have 10 emails about why can't I see the birds anymore. So I think if we do that, we're going to have to do it so that the camera is at a low angle, you get a nice view from the side. I'm sure we can do that, but I need to talk to the vergers about it, because clearly if we can't put a roof in, then we'll just come up with a different design.
Now, if you put a glass roof in, Keith, then the cameras would be able to see everything, and it wouldn't be visible from down below, and that ticks all the boxes. That's
lateral thinking for you there, Simon. I'm very impressed by that.
Mainly because we've got perspex roofs on our hedgehog houses, so that we can watch them.
But probably have to give it a bit of a clean as well, I should think. But yeah, that's an interesting idea. Perspex roof. I think there's also a bit of a danger with perspex and stuff like that, because we might find them not seeing it and flying into it. But let's just think about it. Yeah, when you see starling murmurations being attacked, is it normally a peregrine? It's quite often sparrowhawks, actually. Sparrowhawks and peregrines both will attach starling murmurations. So they're both very, very good aerial hunters. I mean, the peregrine is the fastest bird on the planet, but I've got a bit of bad news for you, and that is that the calculation that it can fly at 240 miles an hour was done at 15,000 feet. And there was a hot air balloon went up, and they released this peregrine at 15,000 feet. And of course, it shot down, and it did reach 240 miles an hour. But at 15,000 feet, the air is a lot thinner than it is at the ground. So at ground level, a peregrine probably could fly at over 100 miles an hour, but not very easily. And indeed, from the work we've done, we find they very often fly at about 80 miles an hour. So I'm afraid, although it's in the Guinness Book of Records, they've had to write a little note in just to sort of put in brackets, by the way, this was at 15,000 feet, therefore not a very good comparison with what happens in real life. Do they tend to fight or clash with other birds of prey? Well, they certainly do fight buzzards. Any buzzard that flies over, or kite that flies over Winchester, they'll get up, they'll send it off. And indeed in Exeter, where there's quite a lot of buzzards, they kill them. They've killed quite a lot of buzzards. I mean, we're well into double figures on the number of buzzards killed in Exeter. I mean, Winnie brought down a buzzard a few years ago. I remember that very well, but it did recover.
And Keith, obviously, you deal with a lot of other birds as part of your house work. In terms of peregrines compared to other birds of prey, what are the numbers like in Hampshire for that kind of thing? Because obviously, we see red kites now, almost 10 a penny compared to what they used to be. So,
okay, well, roughly speaking, there's about 500 pairs of red kites in Hampshire now. Buzzards, I would think the number is going to be something more like 1,000 to 1,500. Sparrowhawk is actually remarkably common. I mean, we see them in the gardens a lot. It's become a garden bird as much as it is a woodland bird now. And I would think there's probably a couple of thousand to 3,000 pairs of sparrowhawk. It's about 120 pairs of goshawks. They're much rarer, much bigger. Honey buzzards, which are rare, there's probably about somewhere between 5 and 10 pairs. Marsh harriers, again, between 5 and 10 pairs. And kestrels, I don't have a number for kestrels. They've been declining over the last few years, but 1,000, 2,000, something like that, probably more like 1,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions here? Could we have just half a roof? It's a good idea. We'll certainly discuss that for sure. We have one red kite, says Jacqueline, on its own in Romsey. It doesn't appear to have a mate. Is this normal? Well, Jacqueline, when you see that red kite next time, look at its breast. If it is a dark colour, the same colour as the underside of the wing, then that'll be an adult red kite. But if it's got a pale breast, which a lot of them have, that's a young bird that's only, well, less than 2 years old. It'll be a 2022 chick. And those birds tend to not be together with anybody else because they're too young to nest. And they go on a kind of gap year, go traveling around. We've had birds we've tagged, they've gone all the way up to Yorkshire and then come back again and nested in Hampshire. So it's probably a young bird that hasn't actually, isn't actually old enough to nest yet. So Amy says, do we know why kestrels are declining? Well, I think the main driving force behind that is the reduction in the available small mammals. So we know that small mammal populations, voles, shrews, things like that, are at a low level compared to 30 years ago. And that will have driven down the population of kestrels because that's what they rely on. I didn't mention hobby. Hobby's another one that nests in Hampshire. There's probably about 170 pairs of hobbies. It's quite an elusive bird, very special bird. It comes to us only in the summer. And indeed, young hobbies look very much like young peregrines, and may remember that one turned up in a department store in the middle of Winchester, and it was on a Saturday or Sunday, and everybody, yes, must have been a Sunday, and we had loads of phone calls, had to get the bird out, and it was actually a hobby, not a peregrine. Well, I think we've run out of questions here.
Yeah,
But
it
we've
leaves
got-
that obvious question of, can you share the camera? Because I'm sure people are still interested to understand what's going on with Rosie at the moment.
Yeah, I don't. Well, I could have a go. This will probably crash absolutely everything. Let me just see if I can get it. Can you still see me at the moment? Or what can you see? You're just seeing me, aren't you?
Yep.
Carry on asking me a question whilst I do this, Simon, because I'm going to have to just boot up the system. I can do it.
Well, I was going. The only other thing I was going to say was, if you could share just a little bit of information about HOS. I've been a HOS member for a while now, and find there's all sorts of interesting things going on there. And obviously, we're so grateful to have you tonight. So,
oh, very happy to do this.
The chance for you to be able to publicise a little bit of the HOS work while you're booting that up would be really good.
Well, it would be really great if some of the people watching, if you're not already a member of HOS, think about joining. It's the Hampshire Ornithological Society with our Kingfisher logo. If you want to have a look at our website, it's hos.org.uk. It is pretty much the largest county bird club in the country now. We've got about 2,000 members. But in spite of being huge, it's actually very friendly, which is what I do like about it. It's always been friendly. We do outings almost every weekend somewhere, either inland or on the coast. We do training sessions if people want to learn about birds. We don't do a lot of indoor meetings because frankly, that's what people used to do. So we quite often do Zoom sessions. And there are lots of Zoom talks by myself and others on the HOS website you can have a look at. So we could, we'd love to see you. It's only £16 a year. We get 3 magazines a year, and you also get a Hampshire Bird Report, and you can have it all digitally if you want. You don't want to clutter up with lots of paper. Well, I'm just loading the system. It's a little bit slow, but I'm almost there. Simon, keep going with another question, and I'll.
Surely someone else has got some questions.
I can't see the question thing now because I'm busy doing this, but
do they have a Facebook site for HOS?
HOS does have a Facebook site. It's also got a Twitter account, which is HOS Birding. And
is the Facebook site the Hampshire Birding site, or is that?
No, the Hampshire Birding site is actually now run by HOS. It never used to be, but it is now. Indeed, I look after that, but we have our own Hampshire Ornithological Society one as well.
That I did not know. So
Yeah, so, but you know, it tends to be more announcements about what we're doing. We have one annual meeting a year. Chris Packham quite often turns up at that. Chris is our president. And right, I'm almost there, by the way. So I'm just going to actually.
yeah, I mean, what I also say on HOS is that if any of you have got children, or if there's any children on here tonight with parents, then the initiatives for young birders and youngsters into wildlife are just amazing. And some of the stuff that's appeared at the HOS annual meetings has just been astounding. So I absolutely recommend it if you are looking to get children and young adults into wildlife.
Right, I'm almost there. Let's see if I can do this. I think it might well not work. It's optimistic, isn't it? Where is it gone? Here we are. It's on here. Share that. Let's see what happens. Oh no, I probably got to go into it. Let me just see. Are you seeing that application?
We're seeing your screen now, the HIC Partner Pro.
Yeah, okay, well here it goes. Let's see what happens.
Everyone get into the brace position.
It's loading. Yeah, it's coming on.
Is this going to be like one of those apocalyptic things where they have the EMP and then suddenly everyone loses electricity, all communications and their way of life?
Could be. I mean, I'll tell you what, you won't be able to sell this to people once you've finished the recording. Okay, the screen's coming on. We're any second now, if you can see this. The cameras are just loading. It's actually a rather slow system, I have to say. But in a moment, we will see the, yeah, here we go. So can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the chick's up the end. Right, so let me see if I can control the camera. Hang on, let me just see what I can do here. Let me just get rid of this. Let me try this.
All year round, Keith, or just during the breeding season?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is the camera on all year round?
Oh,
or
no,
just,
no, it's only on at this time of the year.
Right, okay.
There's literally nothing to watch for about 10 months of the year.
Hey, well, there we go. Oh, lovely. So Rosie's up the end. I'll just move the camera up a little bit. She's up the end. And she seems to have a dead gull for company. Or something. Let's go and have a look at her. I can zoom this in. Here we go. There she is. That's not bad, is it? That's a pretty good picture. So this is how I control it. I've got a little wheel. So I think that's a dead black-headed gull that she's got. Yep, that's a black-headed gull, complete with black head.
You drunk to eat?
Yeah. So what I can do with this is I can move this around all over the place. I can look down, I can look left. I can actually have a look at the people in the Mercure Hotel, see if there's anything interesting going on there tonight. Don't think so.
Careful.
Yeah, I know. I
If you
should get
start to look in windows, then we might have some problems.
Woo. I'll take it back quickly.
Especially
No,
as you're recording this.
I know this is great. Actually, it means I can. If Winnie was sitting just here, I could have a look, but I don't think she is. I think I have had Winnie sit on the. Yeah, it's horrible when you get the sun like that. Anyway, there we are. So that's what you asked, Di. You asked where Rosie was. Rosie's gone off the tray and she's found her own little space. And that's fine because she'll be okay there. Right. Well,
And when are we expecting the first flight, Keith?
Well, the first flight, I think, would be first or second week of June. And, that's usually when it is. And she'll be, I don't think she'll go back on the train now very much. She won't go back up. She'll just stay where she is. It's a nice, clear picture. Good. Let me actually see if I can improve I can probably make that even sharper. There we go. That's sharper. It's now
That's
actually,
brilliant. Thank you very much, Keith.
that's
Brilliant.
okay. Right. Well, I think if we're
I
done,
think there's a couple more questions
are there? Okay.
very quickly, so
can
just
you
bear with
read them?
me. There's a question about the possibility of a camera round the corner in the other gully. I know this has been mentioned for a
Yeah.
couple of years, although I know that it wouldn't be used more than for about a week, but
It's certainly something that comes up, and I think the problem is it would be quite a lot of money for the cathedral to pay for it. But it's, you know, I think what I would say is this: if we do end up doing something like putting the you know, the box, put a box, for example, at this end where the dead gull is, facing down the gully, we'd probably move the camera that's right above the box and put it around the corner or something. I mean, we'll have to look at it.
apparently Amy's got her 3-year-old and 6-year-old watching, so hi to them.
Hello.
Hopefully they've had a good evening.
Well, if you're 3 to 6 years old, then you're probably about the same age as Rosie, just getting ready to walk or run around.
Do you remember 3-year-olds and 6-year-olds, Keith?
I don't actually, never had any kids.
No,
I just
it's the
realised that.
same here, but they're a lot more mobile than you think. If you're thinking they're getting ready to walk at 3 and 6.
Now, where am I? I've actually completely lost control of this camera now. What am I doing? Here we are. Stop share. There we are. We're back. Good.
And the other question was about host membership.
Oh yeah, I can see that now.
And are there any restrictions on being able to join? As for some reason I can't scroll this.
That's okay. I can scroll it.
Screen, okay.
So you do you have to live in Hampshire? I moved to Scotland a few years ago. No, we'd love to have you. We have, in fact, we've got people who are university graduates, undergraduates, who are actually members of HOS at university all over the country, which is great. We give them free membership if they're at university. Is there possibly the other Gallic camera? Thank you so much, Keith and Simon. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Couldn't Chris Packham help with the protest over the pylon? Well, that's a good question. I do talk to Chris a lot, but I don't try to trouble him about things like that. At the end of the day, they weren't breaking the law. It was simply they were doing what was right for their business. And I think it was, I was actually on a yacht in Bangladesh, so it was quite hard for me to deal with it as well. I only had Wi-Fi, you know, sort of a couple of hours every day. But I do use Chris when it's something really serious. I think at the end of the day, this is probably too much to ask him. He was actually also having 3 months off at the time. I must say, I'm actually very pleased that he's won his libel case, if I'm honest. I think what was written about him was really horrible stuff. And, you know, he, you know, not everybody loves Chris, does say things that upset people, but frankly, that's what people do sometimes, but you must remain truthful about what you write about people in the press. Good. Oh, I know a potential kite buzzard nest. Should I report it anywhere? Don't worry, we've got lots of kite and buzzard nests now with 500 pairs of kites and buzzards. But if you think there's a problem with it, let somebody know. But it's good to know that they are nesting there. Good. I think we're out of questions, Simon.
Perfect. No, thank you so much again, Keith. I mean, again, just to highlight to everyone that Keith does this entirely off his own back. So volunteers every year to do this for us. And Keith has been totally instrumental. That the reason that the camera's there is because of Keith. The reason that the Peregrines are on the cathedral is because of Keith. So all of this, and the thousands and thousands of views and hits that the cathedral website gets, that the nearly 10,000 members that we've got on Wild Winchester, a large part of that is down to you, Keith. So we'd really like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, all of us, and thank you again for giving your time so generously.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. And thanks everybody for turning up. I mean, most of you stayed, which is really good. And, you know, look forward to doing it again next year. And of course, you know, I'm going actually to be in America for the next few weeks, but I will be watching and I'll still write the blog even from America. So we'll try and keep you all in the picture as to what's going on.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Keith.
Good. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now.